Welcome to the Deep Dive. This is where we take sources you provide and, well, we cut right to the chase, getting you the key insights. It's about being informed, without all the legwork.
Exactly. Efficient knowledge.
So today we're diving into a situation that's been getting a lot of attention, and rightly so, the ongoing imprisonment of Pakistan's former Prime Minister, Imran Khan.
And our main source for this is quite personal. It's a recent YouTube interview with his two sons, Kasim and Suleiman Khan.
Right, and they're speaking from London as British citizens, which gives this, an interesting outside perspective on a really complex internal situation in Pakistan.
And it taps into this widespread view, you hear it a lot, that his imprisonment isn't just legal proceedings, but something more like a politically motivated, well, witch hunt, some call it.
Which, sadly, fits into the broader historical pattern in Pakistan, doesn't? The military's significant influence on politics over the decades.
It certainly does. There's a long history there.
Okay, so our mission today, really get a handle on the reality of Imran Khan's imprisonment. What are the conditions like? What are the alleged motivations behind it? And what are the wider implications? All seen through the eyes of his sons.
Let's get into it.
All right, so the interview kicks off referencing a tweet from Imran Khan's former wife, Jemima. She detailed some really concerning conditions she'd heard about.
Yeah, things like family and lawyer visits being stopped, court hearings postponed.
And crucially, those weekly calls with his sons in the UK apparently stopped since September last year. That's a long time.
A very long time. She also mentioned electricity being cut off in his cell, being confined constantly, even the jail cook being sent away, leaving him totally isolated in the dark.
So Kasim and Suleiman were asked directly, was that description accurate when your mother posted it?
And their answer is pretty key. It's worth remembering, like you said, when this interview happened, he'd already been locked up for over a year. The Sons actually estimated it was closer to 2 years by then.
Yeah, nearly 2 years.
And their confirmation wasn't just about that specific moment. It painted a picture of a recurring pattern.
Exactly. They confirmed it completely. They said, look, we've known about these periods, no light, no outside contact, sometimes no medical access. It wasn't a one-off.
Even the court-ordered weekly calls, they mentioned maybe getting one every couple of months. Highly sporadic.
And they drew a direct line between these clampdowns, like cutting the lights, stopping visits, and specific events. In this case, the big protests after the election, people protesting against what they saw as democratic suppression.
Which brings us to the description of his cell.
Right, this term death cell.
Yeah.
A tiny space, 7 by 8 feet, usually for terrorists, designed for total isolation. Kasim, Suleiman, what do they say this actually means day to day? And when did they last actually speak to him?
Well, that term death cell really hits home the severity, doesn't it? It's not just solitary, it's extreme isolation.
Total isolation.
Total, no contact with any other prisoners at all. And the darkness thing. They mentioned one specific period of 10 days straight with no electricity. Nothing.
10 days. It's hard to even process.
The psychological impact of that kind of sensory deprivation, it's designed to break people.
But Kasim shared something pretty incredible about how his dad coped. He said initially it was obviously terrible, but eventually he managed to reach this almost Zen-like state.
Yeah, he even said those 10 days could have felt like a year, but he found a way through it.
It really highlights that resilience they kept mentioning. You both stressed how mentally strong he is. So when they do get those brief calls, 20 minutes you said? And unreliable, how does he actually sound? Is he holding up?
Remarkably so, according to them. They consistently describe him as incredibly resilient. One son called him the most resilient person he knows.
Wow.
And apparently he doesn't complain about the conditions on these calls. His focus immediately goes to them, to their well-being.
It's quite something. 20 minutes, often cut short, and he uses the first part to share things he's read, history, religion, and then quickly asks about them. His focus is outward, even then.
And the logistics of these calls sound almost deliberately chaotic.
Totally. Getting a text at 4 a.m. for a 10 a.m. call, miss it, and you wait months. And even then, maybe an hour's wait just to connect, only for it to drop after 20 minutes.
It feels systematic, doesn't it? Like part of a strategy.
Which leads to the big question, why? What's the motivation behind treating a former prime minister this way? Kasim and Suleiman had their own thoughts on this.
They were pretty direct. They believe it's a deliberate strategy to break him. Because he is resilient, because he is still popular, they feel these extreme tactics are seen as necessary by those in power.
The specific things: cutting lights, isolation, denying medical help. the call chaos.
All tools, they argue, designed to apply maximum psychological pressure. It's a grim playbook seen elsewhere with political prisoners, unfortunately, trying to crush their spirit, undermine support.
It is chilling.
Yeah.
Now, there was that mention of an offer for house arrest, which he apparently refused.
Mhm.
Suleiman, what was his reasoning, according to them?
Principles, basically. Suleiman highlighted his father's strong sense of solidarity. How could he accept house arrest while so many of his supporters, his party members, are still in jail facing, similar or maybe even worse conditions?
It would go against everything he stands for, in their view,
Exactly.
which speaks volumes. Now, for them, living safely in London, did they ever, try to persuade him, say, Dad, maybe just prioritize getting out. Forget politics for a bit.
That's a tough personal question they addressed. They admitted, yeah, when they were younger, they sometimes wished he'd choose an easier life, step away from the political fray.
Understandable.
But they've come to see that politics is genuinely his passion. He feels this deep obligation to the people of Pakistan. They seem to think he probably could negotiate his release, maybe cut a deal, align with the powers that be.
But he won't.
But he won't. And that defiance, in their eyes, is precisely why he's still locked up.
They clearly respect his stance, even while they must be worried sick. Kasim mentioned that on the calls, their dad often lectures them, in a good way, about rule of law, about justice for Pakistan.
Reinforcing his commitment, yeah.
And it's interesting, he apparently always told them to stay out of Pakistani politics, quite different from the dynastic approach you see elsewhere.
A definite contrast.
So given all that, and their own preference for privacy, why speak out now? Why this big interview?
They essentially said they feel they've run out of options. They've tried legal routes, diplomatic channels, everything behind the scenes. They never thought it would go on this long or get this bad.
So, speaking publicly is a last resort.
Feels like it, yes. Their main goal now is to get the world's attention, to put international pressure on Pakistan. Pressure about his treatment, which they call inhumane, and about the broader suppression of democracy they see happening.
They noticed international media coverage fading, right?
Yeah, they felt the story was dropping off the radar, and they're deeply worried. Not just for their father, but for all political prisoners and the state of democracy itself.
The interview brought up the international dimension, specifically Richard Grenell, former U.S. official, calling for Khan's release and drawing parallels with Trump's experiences. What did the Sons make of that kind of support?
They expressed gratitude for anyone speaking out, like Grinnell, even without direct contact. They acknowledge those parallels. People draw the idea of lawfare, using legal systems for political goals.
Right.
And their message to, say, the Trump administration or any government was pretty clear. If you support free speech, if you support democracy, then speak up. Call for our father's release.
They're hoping high-profile figures, maybe like Trump, could really shine a spotlight on this. They're asking for public support for influential people to reach out directly.
And history does show that international pressure can make a difference in these kinds of situations. It can influence how prisoners are treated, and it can push for democratic norms.
It really brings home how global politics are intertwined. Okay, shifting slightly, the conversation also covered the alleged targeting of Khan's supporters, even family. He himself has claimed social media workers, activists, supporters have been harassed, even abducted, to silence criticism. Did Kasim and Suleiman confirm this?
They did, sadly. They said it's true, pointing to reports widely reported of journalists, supporters, party members being detained, sometimes disappearing for a while.
And reappearing sometimes to denounce the party.
Exactly. They mentioned seeing people publicly denounce Khan's party after these incidents, which suggests, a climate of intense fear and coercion aimed at shutting down dissent.
It's deeply troubling. And it makes sense then why they might have hesitated to speak out before, worrying about repercussions.
Absolutely. Kasim even shared a personal story finding out about his dad's first arrest right before he had to give a huge presentation for a startup. It just shows how this political turmoil is the constant backdrop to their lives.
And Suleiman said his father had warned him arrest was possible, but nobody expected it to last this long.
No, they really underestimated the duration.
Despite all this darkness, there were these little moments in the interview revealing Khan's personality. Sharing insights from his reading, yes, but also his humor. Can you remind us of that anecdote?
Yeah, it was quite something. He apparently joked about how desperate his opponents must be, citing the censorship around the anniversary of Pakistan winning the 1992 Cricket World Cup.
Where they literally cropped him out. The captain.
The winning captain. Cropped out of the historical team photos. He found a dark humor in that, I suppose. It shows he's still aware of the political games, even isolated.
It's almost beyond belief. Cropping out the World Cup captain, it says so much. But on a more profound level, did the Suns feel he's changed or grown through this ordeal?
They did. They believe he feels he's learned a tremendous amount, developed personally, and actually has a clearer roadmap for the future because of this experience.
Really, he sees it as a learning period.
Apparently so. He views it, they said, as a significant learning curve. He reportedly feels he's grown more mentally and spiritually in these last 2 years than maybe in the previous 20.
Wow.
And he's actively thinking, strategizing about what role he can play in Pakistan's future when or if he gets out. Still optimistic, despite everything.
That level of inner strength is incredible. But understandably, the Suns' hope is tinged with real fear. What are their biggest worries now?
It's that fading international spotlight, mainly, and the fear that without that pressure, things could get worse, that more serious charges could be fabricated. Even they mention the possibility of the death penalty being sought.
That's terrifying.
It is. And that growing desperation about his situation, the feeling that the world was moving on, that's what ultimately pushed them to do the interview. They did confirm, though, that they got his blessing first.
A huge decision for them. Beyond the politics, what did they share about him just as a father?
They painted a picture of someone deeply devoted who always made time for them, even with his incredibly demanding career. And they mentioned his sense of humor again, surprisingly enduring.
When's the last time they actually saw him in person?
About 2.5 years ago,
Hmm.
and the circumstances were grim. It was right after the assassination attempt where he was shot.
Yes.
Their description of that visit just highlights the constant danger. Bomb-proof cars, sniper threats mentioned, needing food checked for poison.
A world away from a normal family life.
Completely a stark contrast to how things used to be when they saw him frequently for long stretches.
And now they can't even visit Pakistan safely. Why not?
Because the targeting has extended to the wider family, aunts, cousins have been arrested. Their fear is that if they went, they could become pawns, potentially putting their father in even more danger.
The pressure is immense. Did they offer a direct message to the Pakistani establishment?
Yes, quite clearly. It was essentially a plea. Respect democracy. Respect the will of the people shown in the last election, even with all the obstacles his party faced.
Obstacles like?
Like banning their party symbol, the cricket bat, crucial in a country with high illiteracy, plus the widespread allegations of rigging, the internet shutdowns on election day, actions they believe fundamentally undermine the whole process.
They laid out a strong case for democratic interference and the specific charges against their father. How do they view those?
As ridiculous was the word they used, ranging from apparently selling exotic fruit to corruption.
Exotic fruit.
That's what they mentioned. Their core belief is that even the establishment knows he isn't corrupt. They point to his decades in politics. He had opportunities to get rich through the main parties, they say, but chose not to.
So they see it purely as political persecution.
Yeah.
How did the rest of the family react to them speaking out so publicly?
Mixed reactions, they said. Some were hesitant, understandably, given the political heat the family is already under.
But the Suns felt.
They felt the potential benefit to their father, shining a light on his situation, outweighed the personal risks of stepping into the spotlight themselves.
It takes real courage. If Imran Khan can send one message to the world right now, what do they imagine it would be?
Based on everything they said, probably a message of strength. That he's still standing, still resilient, and still believes change is possible for Pakistan.
And finally, what were Kasim and Suleiman's own closing messages to Pakistanis and the world?
To the people of Pakistan, don't give up hope. Their father hasn't given up. He's planning for the future. Keep protesting injustice peacefully.
And to the international community.
A direct call to action. Look at the inhumane treatment, the denial of basic rights happening to a man who, they argue, should be leading the country. If you care about human rights, this needs to be a priority. They specifically mentioned his age, his health, the fact he was recently shot, all making the current conditions even more dangerous.
So this deep dive really lays bare a deeply disturbing picture. Imran Khan's severe imprisonment, potentially politically driven, his remarkable resilience against isolation, and his son's desperate plea for the world to pay attention and act.
The personal cost to the family is immense, and their decision to speak out is clearly born from that desperation.
Absolutely. It leaves you thinking, doesn't it? About how fragile democracy can be and how vital international awareness is when basic human rights seem under threat. Whatever your politics, the questions this case raises about justice, human rights, and democratic integrity demand serious thought.